Hello there, it's Silver, and this is Lost Castle 2. This is a roguelite brawler, a 2D brawlery action RPG kind of setup. I've never actually played the first one, but it looks a lot like this, is sort of taking what they learned with the first outing and expanding it, like refining it. It's currently in early access at the time I'm writing this, but it's several large updates in, and you can tell. In fact, it just had a pretty big update very recently, adding an entirely new weapon type and the related mechanics and skills. There's another big one on the way that will refine the new weapons, katanas, and add some more, as well as completely new areas with 2 new bosses and 6 new boss weapons. It seems like the people developing this focus on putting out large updates as the average, often adding significant amounts of new content. It's pretty clear that they've focused on both content and polish over the span of the roughly 1 year-ish the game has currently been in early access. It started a little rough, but has really come into its own recently, and the game feels overall much more polished and has several important quality of life features that help with the things like builds and finding synergies and those things that you would want from the genre. They also do something I really like, which is enable a beta branch with tons of changes for a while in order to get loads of feedback and make adjustments to it all. Then, on the next major update, they'll merge the beta with the release, adding in all that extra stuff after having a while to get feedback for it. As an example, the recent update did this and took the number of treasures from about 180 to about 300, while also adding some tagging systems to make builds more direct to put together during a run. It's a solid strategy, in my opinion, that focuses on showing fun ideas and gathering feedback for a crucial period before merging it all and making the updates impactful and sizable while allowing player feedback to shape the overall direction. In terms of the audiovisual presentation the game is going for, I think it nails the style it clearly wants to carry. The original Lost Castle looks kind of like a prototype in comparison. It's clear they were thinking of this style back when they made the first game, but the level of detail and character in the sequel shows just how far they've come since then. It uses this super colorful, cartoonish presentation that gives the sense of a graphic novel or maybe even a high-quality Newgrounds animation. The game is super colorful all over the place, from the characters and enemies to the backgrounds and bosses, and even the various effects for loot and magic. The whole game oozes this animated charm that ends up in every aspect of the presentation. The overall art style is exaggerated and comic or cartoon-like, but it also doesn't simplify things. The backgrounds and levels have huge amounts of detail, often capturing your eyes without being too distracting during gameplay. The area backgrounds tend to have a great sense of 3D depth and also usually have some specific parts that are meant to stand out as you walk through them. There's even some nice parallax added to many of the background elements. It helps that each of the areas you can visit is very different aesthetically, so as you venture through the run, it feels like a nicely varied adventure. The game also uses altered camera angles in certain bits to give a cool sense of scale or create like a panorama for the big, foreboding titular castle. Enemies, bosses, and character art is also great. This uses an animation style similar to puppet animation, but I'm not sure if that's what it actually is. The result is that enemies have charming and exaggerated animations, and bosses share that effect but make it even more obvious due to the scale of them. The colors used for different enemy types seem to be chosen well, with the color schemes making them feel like they belong together in each area, but also making sure they don't easily blend into the environments. Your character is also fully customizable and has a good-looking animation set for each weapon type. You also show whatever armor you're wearing at the time, which have great detail and look very different from each other. There are also NPCs you'll sometimes encounter that often wear armor and use weapons that you can actually find for yourself, almost making them feel like thematic pre-built versions of what you can do for yourself later. In terms of music and audio, there's quite a bit of effort put into the soundtrack for each area to match with the visuals. One big advantage of roguelites is that you tend to go between biomes in one direction, one at a time. This allows each one to be a self-contained fragment of the adventure, so that audio and visuals can be sort of all-encompassing and fit each place perfectly. This game obviously uses that to its advantage visually, but it also does quite a bit with it audio-wise. Each area's track is thematically consistent with the place it appears. They tend to be somewhat upbeat, but also kind of mysterious sounding. They combine sections of faster action with slower wandering bits, and it means each track matches great with where it goes. Then you add in other tracks like the peaceful hub music and the higher octane boss fights, and you complete the set for having visuals and audio fit nicely together. All in all, I think Lost Castle 2 does a lot to create a colorful and ecstatic presentation and manages to nail it pretty consistently. The remaining part would be the menus and loot windows and things. Considering the genre we're in, the player will be spending a decent amount of time in these menus. They tend to do a good job of displaying all relevant info in an easy to understand way, complete with direct gear comparisons, detailed numbers to crunch, and tooltips for extra effects and unusual mechanics. In an action RPG, you want the menus to tell you everything you need to know cleanly, and you also want them to not get in your way. I think what we have here is a solid way to display needed things like stats and enchantments without requiring the player to spend excess amounts of time in loot comparison mode, killing the pacing of the game. It's clear they've tried to avoid obtuse windows and comparisons for gear that feel like you need to look closely at loads of numbers for 20 minutes every time, so the clean design works well, but it also isn't so clean that it omits info you need, especially when dealing with things like weapon skills and armor enchantments where you do need that detail. When we look at gameplay, we see a pretty complex action RPG formula that focuses itself on weapon versatility and the ability to build multifaceted combos of loot to bring together a powerful set of synergies, often about halfway through a run-ish. Almost everything in the game benefits from stacking and combining with other things. It seems they went out of their way to stand against one of the biggest problems present in this genre, which is the ability to miss out on good synergies by getting bad loot rolls. In this case, they've clearly thought a lot about how to prevent that starved build effect, by having the treasures have lots of paths you could take to use them together effectively. It's hard to miss out on a build for very long when so many of the items have ways to work with each other. One big aspect of this are the rune stones. There are 3 different types, colored red, green, and blue. Almost all loot will give you at least one of these stones when picked up. You can also find loose stones sometimes. Weapons don't add to these, but armor usually does. At 4 different thresholds, 5, 10, 15, and 20, these stones provide you with strong passive effects just for having them. 5 blue stones gives you a small global skill power boost, for instance. The effects on these are general enough to be beneficial to almost all builds in some way, giving you something to work towards aside from the more direct effects of the loot you gather. But their effects don't end there. They also have a few other synergies, and these are the ones that help other items work together and prevent the player from getting starved of good builds just for getting unlucky loot rolls. For one, there are the extra effects that loot can give you that are aligned with these stones. Green stones have the AoE Rune Quake, red stones have the single target focused Rune Slash, and blue stones have Rune Bullets, extra magic missile-like shots that fire off automatically for extra damage. Getting more of that color rune will empower and add extra effects to these attacks. The other bit is that many pieces of loot have thresholds of runes that can be met to make them stronger. You may have a treasure that makes a rune slash happen on crit, and then in the description it'll say that with 10 red runes, it'll cause these slashes to repeat on the same target to multiply their damage. You'll find some loot that unlocks extra effects by having a certain amount of 1 or 2 rune types, and then there are even a few that count all 3, like the Elemental Crown that gives huge buffs to all elemental damage. This system is pretty cool. It adds some extra spice to the things that you can do on a run by adding some powerful facets to builds, and it also helps to ensure pieces of loot are working together by using the rune bonuses to make the possible synergies of each treasure reach wider than they otherwise would. It's a smart system that leads to great build variety and an avoidance of the problem where the player doesn't drop any loot that actually affects their current build and they get starved of power from bad rolls. One other significant part of your run are the weapons. This game uses a fun system where each weapon type has its own mechanics unique to it, somewhat reminiscent of something like Monster Hunter, honestly. Some weapons are pretty straightforward, like the two-handed swords. They have slow but powerful swings and overhead attacks that can be charged for whirlwind strikes and jumping overhead slams. You can also hold both attack buttons to charge an attack that gets an extra third segment on the charge gauge and combines both of the other charge attacks into one big combo that does loads of damage. But then you have some weirder types, like the Turbo Lance. It acts as a sort of drill on a stick that builds up a heat gauge you can release as a piercing blast forwards. But you can also charge up the gauge completely to enter a super mode for increased damage and finish it off with a massive piercing blast that extends past the screen and tends to murder everything in sight. Every weapon also has a unique skill attached to it. This uses mana to cast, which is generally refilled by hitting things normally, although there are other ways to regenerate it depending on what loot you found. The weapon skills add a ton of variety and make each weapon feel more unique. They are also quite often powerful and many times work in ways that are relevant to the mechanics of that weapon type. It's the cherry on top that gives each weapon its personality and dictates how best to use it. Weapons come in all rarities, from common white to orange legendary, and there are also boss weapons they can sometimes drop on defeat that you can't get any other way. There are different sorts of rooms you'll choose while exploring, from enemy rooms with standard battles in them, challenge rooms with better rewards if you can complete their goals, elite rooms filled with much stronger enemies and higher rarity rewards, as well as other types like shops and healing rooms. At the end of a combat room, there will be either a chest or an altar. The chests toss out various rewards like money, treasures, and sometimes chaos items like weapons or armor. Chaos items give you a choice between 3 different items of that type when you poke them, allowing you to grab something relevant to your current build. Altars instead give you a choice of 3 items of one type. Armor is also important. It comes in the same rarities and increases your maximum health, as well as adding other bonuses depending on type. We've got light, heavy, and cloth armor types, and there are loads of enchantments and things they can have as you get towards epic and legendary gear. I like that all armor shows on your character. A lot of it looks really cool, so it's nice to have a shifting appearance as you go through a run. New weapons and armor are things you'll always be looking out for in each area, and as you advance, you'll get higher rarity drops. You'll start finding legendary weapons and armor in the last 2 areas. The treasures are the passive items you'll be collecting to create a build, and they come in many different forms. They can have a wide variety of effects and synergies, and most of the power you'll be gathering will come from these. Boss chests always have a choice of legendary treasures. These are in a lane of their own in terms of the power they offer. You do have a specific weight limit in your bag, though. Every treasure has a weight, and you have to make sure it'll fit within your limit. If it doesn't, you'll get a chance to discard currently held treasures until it does fit. This is a bit unique, as most roguelites allow you to stack as many passive items as you want, but by limiting the number you can hold, they are sort of allowed to be stronger as a whole. You'll gather these purple crystal shards as you go. These are spent in shops in-run for new treasures and gear. You can also go into your pack at any time and convert unwanted loot into crystals to free up space. Shops are always found right before the boss of an area and contain 1 weapon, 1 armor, and several treasures and runestones. You can also break down unwanted weapons and armor into ingots. You can use these machines in shops and the rest areas to spend ingots on upgrading the stats of your weapons and armor. Higher rarities take much larger amounts of resources. You'll also be able to use them on enchanting your gear with new effects and upgrading current enchantments. Refining your gear here is an important aspect of staying ahead of the curve as you go. You have an alchemy flask displayed as a percentage. You can hold the left bumper at any time to drain this flask to heal yourself. It takes a moment to do so and slows you down while you do it, so during moments like boss fights, you'll need to find a good moment to do it without just taking extra damage. You'll also find cursed rooms. These will have an item on display that you can get for free if you accept a temporary curse that will make things harder for you until a few rooms have passed. There will also be cursed treasures in the room, a choice between 3 of them. These are very powerful, but the curse on them is strong and not temporary. If you feel you can bear the curse, they can be highly effective items. In healing rooms and after boss resting rooms, you'll find a green fountain. These will restore your alchemy flask, but don't heal you and can only be used once. They can also be used to pay crystals to remove those stronger curses on cursed treasures. Doing this doesn't use up the fountain, but it does cost more and more every time you do it. The areas you're going through all have their own roster of enemies that doesn't repeat anywhere else, and each area tends to have 2 different bosses you could potentially encounter. You'll always start at the Black Forest, but at the end of every area after that, you'll have a choice between 2 destinations, allowing you to do a little fine-tuning of your run. Then you'll reach the end. Once you get to the Castle Bridge, your choices go back down to 1, as it's the final area. Boss fights are really good stuff. They have great looks and have plenty of attacks to learn. Most bosses also have 2 phases, and some summon entirely new bosses instead. They can be difficult and hectic, but I find them to be really well designed, and they feel like a solid final exam of what the enemies in that area could do. Since this is a roguelite, there's also some meta progression to take part in. Opening chests, especially boss chests, will give you these gold coins. You can use these coins back at the hub to upgrade the camp in various ways. It'll start with unlocking some new mechanics and then focus on improving them in different ways. You can improve attack scores across the board for all weapons, add new bonuses to armors of each type, or extend the capacity and potency of your alchemy flask. There are lots of upgrades to be purchased, and they'll help you a lot as you delve deeper. Bosses will also drop an ingredient unique to them when beaten for the first time. You can bring these back to the alchemist in the camp to create a passive flask that gives various bonuses depending on what ingredients you use. Camp upgrades will eventually allow you up to 3 components, and beating those bosses again can sometimes drop an upgraded form of their ingredient, making it stronger in the mix. There's also the mysterious amnesiac lady who provides several functions herself. One of those is a series of modifiers that make the game harder for you in various ways. Things like capping your HP or reducing the loot choices in chests. Activate enough of these and you'll enter new levels of Nightmare, each level making things harder but allowing you to get more of the story and unlock new challenges. You can activate each curse thingy multiple times to stack its effects and get more points towards deeper Nightmare levels. She can also identify these magical stones that all have small bonuses and can be socketed in each weapon type to empower them as a whole. You can also choose to ban different weapon types so that they don't appear that run if you're going for something specific. I like that this game uses a sort of weaving of its mechanics to ensure they work together very well and complement each other during a run. I would argue that this is actually better at providing worthwhile synergies and avoiding RNG loot starvation than many other games in the genre. It's clear that what they want to focus on is meaningful variety and allowing the player multiple routes to getting satisfyingly strong. I maintain that roguelites live or die based on variety, and this one has such a good, colorful set of options available that it allows for a lot of player experimentation and freedom to make something fun. Many of these games want each run to feel unique, and this is one of the few that has enough different stuff to find and try that it actually pulls off that goal pretty well. Lost Castle 2 has come a long way during the early access phase it has been in for over a year. They're nearing the end, with only a few large updates left before their roadmap hits 1.0, so that's always a great sign for the future of a game like this. It's always nice to see a team use the EA time as efficiently as possible and focus on player feedback and adding loads of shiny new stuff. I know this game has a bit of a rough start, but I think it's pretty clear just how much they've listened and improved things in order to realize the best version of what they wanted to make. I have no difficulties recommending this one, especially at $15. If you like the roguelite or 2D brawler genres, you are likely to find quite a bit here to enjoy. Add some online co-op into all that, and you have a package that will probably give interested people many hours of enjoyment. I'll put that link down below so that you can check out the Steam store page if you wish. Thanks a ton for watching, and I'll see you next time.